I basically came back from my stint in county cricket at Glamorgan. We wanted to get my son Jai into school back in Queensland. So Taryn and myself just decided that we'd move back to Brisbane, and there was obviously Queensland cricket there and Cricket Australia. Before I left, I'd spoken to Pat Howard about whether there was any potential opportunities coming up. And he said, look, there'd be some interest down the track, but there was nothing available at that stage. So the seeds were sown to get some work there. And then the Victorian men's role came up around the same time, as the Australian women's team role. So I did a bit of research, spoke to a lot of people. I'd always had a pretty strong interest in it. Yeah, I think it was pretty clear at that stage. It was a great opportunity. Even back then, I don't think the profile of the game was the same. So it was under the radar quite a bit, but I'd had some good chats with Meg Lanning when I first got the role, and just thought it was a good fit at that stage, and just was excited to do something very different. Yeah, I think I did a lot of reading before I actually started talking to people as well, and Darren Holder, who was running the coaching program, then sent through some really good articles on coaching females. And I think a lot of people have that preconceived idea. I wanted to go in with a bit of an open mind and just work it out a little bit for myself. I spoke to a number of people, but I suppose you learn by your mistakes a little bit as well. I think, looking back, as a coach coming in, I coached straight from a male environment, and there are slight nuances that you've got to be mindful of. And particularly, I think in the past, when for the cricket players, that they felt that often males coming in was a bit of a stepping stone to something else, and you always had that feeling that he's only going to be around for 5 or 10 minutes and then he'll move on to the next thing. And I think I made it really clear that when I accepted this role, it wasn't something I was just going to come in and flit out of. And time will say that I have stayed in the role, but I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. But I was always, once I made the decision, I wanted to invest and learn and try and do it as well as I possibly could. So a lot of things I learned early was about generic messaging. So you might come from a warm-up, and as a coach, part of coaching is observing different people, and you might come out and say, look, I think we're a bit flat today in the warm-up, and in a male environment that might gloss over, and people might but females tend to internalize. He's talking to me, he's talking right to me, he's having a go at me. And I didn't really think that much about it until later. And then if you look at the way we structure a lot of our meetings, if there are some messages that are a tough conversation, a lot of those are done either one-on-one or in smaller groups, so that you don't just go with a broad brush. In recent times, someone like Shelley Nitschke's been a fantastic resource for me. Obviously a former legend of the game. Is around my era. She'll hate that, but she's a little bit younger than me. But she's around my era, so we connect really well there, and just share ideas. And she's really honest. Like if I've missed the mark, she'll tell me. And she'll do it in a way that's really non-confrontational, and I can take it away and get better at the messaging the next time. I had sisters growing up that played sport, and mum was sporty, so sport was always, it wasn't male or female in our household, but everyone just loved sport. So I've always grown up thinking that I couldn't understand why it wasn't as popular as it should be. And I think, you talk about those moments, like looking around the crowd, 86,000 people at the MCG, boys, girls, men, women, all with a smile on their face, celebrating what had been a very long journey. And I think that, I still get goosebumps thinking about, the players before that did it in front of, like we did in Shield cricket back in the day, 3 men and a dog out in the crowd. And for that to go to that point, and it felt bigger than cricket for me. It felt bigger than sport. It felt like the community was sort of waking up and actually realising that first and foremost, we had a product that was good, and people wanted to go. They wanted to pay their hard-earned money to sit on a plastic seat and watch it, or turn on their TV. So I just feel incredibly fortunate to have been at the back end of it, and for all the people before that did it tough. I've come out at a pretty good time in women's cricket, and we just want to keep growing it as much as we can. I don't want to devalue the loss in the T20, but I actually think that didn't hurt the same. I think the T20 loss, anything can happen in the final, and we played a pretty good game, and West Indies are very good at the back end. And I don't think it hurt the team or the support staff to the extent where it would make significant change. 2017 is very different. I think we all expected to be in the final, and there's no rite of passage, but we were playing reasonable cricket. We thought we were going okay. There was some little cracks there, which I've spoken to you about before, which we tried to address, but there was never going to be the buy-in until we had that real kick in the pants, like that exit. And, it was the way that we lost as well. We were like rabbits in the headlights. Extraordinary innings, albeit, Kaur played one of the innings of, well, certainly her lifetime, but many people would go down and say that's one of the best innings they've ever seen. It was like she flicked the switch at 25 and there was no way we could stop her. So we've been seeing that sort of simmer away for a while, and it wasn't until we didn't get a chance to debrief that at all. We basically, when you exit a World Cup, you're pretty much out in 24 hours. So we just all went our separate directions. We're all hurting. We're all trying to get our head around what happened. And then I think it was a couple of months later, we're preparing for the Ashes, and we met in Brisbane. And that was basically our crucible moment, where we all sat in a group in a dark room and went through that innings and ripped the Band-Aid off, basically, and said, right, okay, this is gone now. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What have we got to change? And once again, I'll go back to our leaders. The leadership in that group said, right, we need to get our values right, and they need to be ones that we live and breathe every day. And we don't want them sitting up in some back corner gathering dust. And they came back, and I said, all we want is a one-pager. We don't want any more fluff. We just want a one-pager that we can live by. We can hold each other to account on. And that came back. It was a fantastic document, very succinct. And we've lived and breathed that since then. Probably the one that gets the most airplay is Fearless. And that came out of that semi-final. I think, pardon me, we were very timid in that final. I don't think anyone went out there to lose the game, but when we were challenged, we took a step back. And so part of what we try to do is enable each other to make mistakes, be prepared to put it on the line, and if it doesn't come off, that's okay. So we weave that into a lot of our meetings and individual meetings on what Fearless looked like for each player. Whether it was Beth Mooney, Fearless for her was maybe taking an off spinner over the top of mid-off early in her innings to get her going. Yes, it was a risk. Yes, she might get caught at mid-off, but she thought about it, and that was her Fearless. That was her way of saying, I'm out here to play. So with the bowlers, when they're under pressure, rather than just trying to get the ball up there because they're scared, no, I'm going to go for a slow wide plan on this particular ball. If it's a wide, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to try it. So Fearless was probably the biggest driver. We also had Team First, which I'm sure a lot of teams would have, but basically meaning, when push comes to shove, what's the team need in this particular circumstance? And the others were informed and accountable. So that came around a lot, where I think in most teams, when they digest a loss, the single most used excuse was, I just didn't know my role. I wasn't clear on my role. So trying to get ahead of that and navigate that and be crystal clear on each person's role within that team, and that they sign off on it. So they're informed about their role and actually accountable. Oh, that's huge. I think when we talk about the women's game, we think of immediately as T20, part of me being the main driver. And I think worldwide that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you said before, I sit on the ICC women's committee, and T20 is no question is the one that's going to drive world cricket. But the players and the purists love the longer form of the game, and it's something that administrators are trying to get their head around, because it does take a lot more time. It makes the series a lot longer, so there's a financial impact on that as well. But I think as a young kid, and now young girls can wake up and I think back to that last Ashes series and the presentation of the caps. Now those memories will never subside for me. You know, the smiles on their faces, their parents being there or their partners. You can't put a price on receiving your baggy green. And so, you know, for these players, they've got 2 opportunities this year. And then a lot of them want to do so well in that, because those are the games you do remember. You know, I think we do play a lot of T20, we play a lot of one-day cricket. It's hard to forget Test match cricket because, you know, it's such an event. And you know, I'd love to see all of us play a game of cricket that people want to watch. I know we've been criticised, you know, in Taunton for the draw, but you know, we value it a lot as well, and we'll play hard cricket and we want to win, but we also don't want to give it up as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see how those go. Obviously, 2 very different venues. The WACA, we're very excited about potentially getting out there and unleashing some of the young quicks against the Indians. And then Manuka will probably be against England a lot more of a attritional game. We'll have to find our way around the ground to get those 20 wickets. Yeah, and it's probably the number one thing at the women's committee level is formats that we talk about, and it's so hard to get the balance right, because what's good for Australia might not be good for Thailand or developing countries. So it's really hard, even in Australia, different formats, different climates. You know, it is so state-based, even in all the stuff here. Like, I think Queensland lends itself, for example, in the heat, to get out of the heat and play midweek night cricket. You know, all those sort of things that the administrators got to start thinking about. But to me, it's a individualised approach, and trying to maximise each country, because every country has different cultural values around how they want to play their cricket. So newer countries, T20 is always going to be the one that drags them in. And then hopefully over time you've got to build, and you know, you bring in one-day cricket, and then utopia is you have your 3 formats across a country, and that shows the strength. I don't think there's any doubt that you know, playing some longer form has some skill acquisition benefits. I see it. My own son, who's 12, he's playing winter cricket up here, and they're playing more overs. You got more of an opportunity to bat and bowl. So, you know, T20 is a fantastic, and will always be the number one driver for the women's game. But I do think we can think forwardly and try and work out how we can best develop our skills amongst our young developing cricketers by giving them longer opportunities. Yeah, I do. I think it's made me a lot better coach. I think when you work with females in sport, the natural coachability is more obvious. So there's not as many barriers put up in the initial time. So you feel like you have the opportunity to coach a little bit more initially, and then you either take that and grab it and run with it, or you stuff it up. You know, like it doesn't give you a free pass forever. But the openness to learning, I think most people would say that's their first takeaway from coaching females.